Hi, friends. I hope you're doing well. I have this app on my iPhone that I use every now and then called Find My. If you ever lose a device, you can go to the Find My app and you can find it. It locates it for you. Android obviously has its own version of this. But have you ever used that app where you've misplaced something? Like a couple of years ago, I hop in my car and I drive off. Kids were playing outside in front of the house, and I get a phone call from my son, and he goes, "Hey, Miriam left her phone on your car, and we didn't realize that you were driving off." And I was like, "Great." So I stop the car and I look, and the phone is not on the car. So it must have fallen somewhere from where I was and to the house. So I retraced my steps or my drive, couldn't find it. Finally, I go, "Oh yeah, Find My." So I go to that app on my phone. I search for Miriam's phone, and there it is, a light blinking, showing me the location, and it was right in the center of University Boulevard. So I drive there, I stop, I see it, the bright purple case, I stop traffic, I grab it in the hopes that maybe a car had not run over it, and sure enough, tire marks right over that case, and the screen was cracked, and it was destroyed, but at least I found it. So do you have a story of a time where you've used the Find My app to locate a misplaced or a lost device? Well, today I want to talk about how to find or how to locate something that's much more significant than a misplaced device. I want to talk about how do you locate your spiritual center right now. And what I mean by that, the spiritual center, I mean the area of greatest God activity going on in your life right this second. So whether you're aware of it or not, recognize it or not, there is a way to locate where there is most activity going on right now spiritually in your life. Sometimes we might have these seasons in our life where we feel like I just don't feel like I'm growing, or that it doesn't feel like I've experienced a lot of spiritual growth in my life. Well, the truth is that God is always working. The Holy Spirit is always moving. The only thing is that oftentimes where we're looking for that activity is not where the Holy Spirit is actually doing her greatest work. And so what I want to do is just show you how to locate where that activity is happening so that you can actually identify it. There is this quote that I am really inspired by. I think about it actually quite a bit ever since I heard it. It's by one of the bishops in England, a retired bishop. His name is Martin Wallace. And what he did is that he talked about where spiritual renewal happens. And in this one quote, he says that the edge is the center of spiritual renewal. The edge is always the center of spiritual renewal. So spiritual renewal doesn't happen in the middle. It happens on the edges. And that is where God is most of the time working, and the Holy Spirit is active and changing us and growing us. It's really interesting, actually, and I remember preaching on something similar to this a few years ago during the pandemic. But if you look at where the early church met, after the ascension, resurrection and ascension, the early church was always meeting in a spot called Solomon's Colonnade in the temple. It was on the edge of the temple. So the center of the temple was where all the religious Jews congregated. And on the edge, along the walls, are these columns. And one of the sides, the eastern side, is called Solomon's Colonnade, and that's where the early church met. It met there for a number of reasons. One of the big reasons is that Gentiles were not permitted to enter into the center enclave where the Jewish religious people were able to be, where the Holy of Holies is, and all that. So the Gentiles had to stay in the outer courts, but also this movement, this Jesus movement, was preaching messages that were not recognized by the center, by the religious establishment. So they were on the outside. So here you have this new movement, this beautiful renewal movement within the Jewish faith, and it's meeting on the edges. And it's just a beautiful, again, reminder of this quote by Martin Wallace, that the edge is always the center of spiritual renewal. that what God is doing, you'll often see this activity, this renewal activity, this revival, liberation activity. It's happening not at the center, it's happening on the edges. And I just asked the question, why is that? The word that comes to my mind when I think about all the reasons why it's on the edges where spiritual renewal happens in our lives or in our institutions, it's because of vulnerability. So when you're on the edge, when you're on the margins, there's something about that space that feels vulnerable. So the center represents cohesion. It represents certainty. It represents preservation. So the center is not very interested in liberation. It's interested in preserving the way things are. There's comfort there. There's stability. There is a certainty. On the edges is where you get more ambiguity. That's where you get, when we talk about people being on the margins in society, there is more exclusion. There is not certainty. There's discomfort on the edges. And somehow it's in that space that the Spirit tends to move for renewal. So I want to just ask you for a second, if you were to say to me, Sari, how do I locate my spiritual center? Like, how do I find out where God is doing the most work in my life right now? The question I would ask you is, where are you feeling least comfortable in life? Where are you feeling like there is the least certainty, or that you are feeling some measure of anxiety or stress, or even feeling like there's extra prayers because you're not feeling so comfortable? Like, where is that area where you feel marginalized? You feel like you're on the outside, you're waiting for something doesn't feel settled in your life. Where is that spot in your life? And I will guarantee you that if you turn your focus there, not as an inconvenience or the thing that you wish you could bring to the center because you don't like it being over here on the edge, it feels uncomfortable on that space on the edge, I guarantee you that if you were to look at that spot, you'll find that that is where God is doing God's greatest work, because there's something about vulnerability that God has always been able to utilize in helping draw us to the deeper meaning of what it means to be human, to connect us to God. You just think about what Jesus was like when he taught people. Like, you think about when Jesus taught us to love our enemies. That is on the margins. It's on the edge, right? What's the center? The center says love your neighbor and hate your enemy. That's the center that we're comfortable with. But Jesus always invited us to the edges. He said, but I say to you, love your enemy. Pray for those who abuse you and who harm you. That is the edge. That's uncomfortable. That's vulnerable. And yet that is where Jesus says God's activity is happening most. And so we are invited to journey from the center to the edges in order to find the exciting and magical and uncomfortable places where God is working. So the edge is always the center of spiritual renewal. I hope you find this helpful. If it's a reminder of some things I've talked about in the past, great. And if it's a new thing, awesome. Let's continue in this beautiful journey of faith and life together. God bless. St. John's. Bye.